The Resurrection F arc in Dragon Ball Super. Probably the weakest point of the entire series so far. Hello there, beautiful friends from around the world. I'm going to be your host, Blackenfist, and today I want to examine the Resurrection F arc in Dragon Ball Super and ask the one question: was it really necessary? Well, I've stated multiple times that retelling the movies in Dragon Ball Super wasn't a necessary thing, but they could have done something with these stories to add more. Battle of Gods attempted to do this by changing a couple of the details and elaborating a little bit more on the movie. So how does Resurrection F stack up? Well, I'd have to say it doesn't look very good. I'm just gonna lay out my cards on the table right now. I don't think the Resurrection F arc was great. And I think this partly has to do with the nature of the source material, the Resurrection F movie. What was the Resurrection F movie? What were the things that it mainly was? What was its bread and butter? Its bread and butter was the action scenes, the choreography, the spectacle of the fight. Well, all of that depends a lot on the animation, and there was just no way that the Dragon Ball Super adaptation of this story was going to match up to the movie version in that respect. Considering that Dragon Ball Super has already had some animation problems in the past, and just the fact that Resurrection F was a movie and therefore had a lot more time and a budget for them to choreograph and orchestrate these fights as spectacle, Resurrection F the arc doesn't have that luxury, and thereby it takes away the biggest strength that the Resurrection F movie had in the first place. So the only other option that the Resurrection F arc really had to go in was elaborating on characters, making characters a lot stronger, delving in more into their minds, developing them. And this was actually something that I thought they were going to do, especially with Frieza, since he's such a focal point, because I did feel that the movie missed out on that opportunity. Unfortunately, they didn't choose that direction. The Resurrection F arc had even less changes to it than the Battle of Gods arc, and I can understand why. Battle of Gods was very character and plot focused, so they could meddle with the character and plot centered things, but Resurrection F was just a fight. One major problem that I think the writers of Dragon Ball Super made was they closed their minds too much on adapting the fight itself. And of course, is the Dragon Ball Super version of this fight going to be better than the movie version? Well, if it's not backed up by compelling characters and delving into their motivations a lot more deeply, then no, they're not going to win on the spectacle and the grandeur of these guys coming to fisticuffs. Let's start with Frieza. With Frieza, I think they missed a major opportunity to elaborate on his character, to elaborate on his training. This is something that I was wondering why they didn't do in the movie, but I guess I could excuse it because they wanted more time to do with the fighting since, you know, they have a limited time in the movie. But for a show, what was their excuse then? The only thing I could think of was that they didn't want to stray away too much from the movie material, but then what's the point of adapting this into an anime if you're not going to make changes to it? And showing Frieza's training is integral to this story. It's something that should have been central to his development in this arc, and we only get a little tiny flashback to it. Now obviously I think the biggest change they made story-wise and character-wise was the fact that Taguma didn't die immediately. I think that it was pretty interesting how Ginyu came back just for a couple moments. There's also the issue of Piccolo and Gohan, and especially Piccolo's death, which honestly didn't have much moxie behind it. Now I understand that the death of Piccolo was a catalyst for Gohan's development in the next arc. As we see, that was one of the things that did motivate Gohan to rethink his life and to maybe go back into training. I did think that the way they treated Gohan, I had a little bit of mixed feelings because at first I was not satisfied with the way they were portraying him. It seemed that Gohan was going to be brushed off aside, but I was very pleasantly surprised that they weren't just throwing Gohan off, that they were using this opportunity to develop his character, for him to realize something about his life, mainly that maybe he cannot just shun training all his life, that maybe he needs to balance his life out a little bit more. It was interesting how Gohan contemplated the death of his loved ones when the whole planet was destroyed, which is probably the one thing that this Dragon Ball Super version did better than the movie. and that was the destruction of Earth, because it involved the characters. It humanized that moment, unlike in the movie where it was not as personal since we just get a shot of the planet blowing up. But at the same time, that's kind of the only legit point I can give it. Almost everything else, the movie did it better. The movie was mainly about fighting. This Dragon Ball Super arc was mainly about fighting. It didn't want to focus on character development, so of course the spectacle is going to be greater in the movie. At least with the Battle of Gods adaptation, I could point to a handful of things that I thought the Battle of Gods arc did better than the movie. So in my conclusion, I feel that the Resurrection F arc has its priorities all mixed up. It didn't put its priorities in the right direction, which was on character. And the reason that it had to focus on character development was because that was the only way that they even had a potential to make this story greater than the original. Because the original was all focused in on fighting with its great animation. So there was no way that the Dragon Ball Super anime was going to compete with that on its own terms. Just think back to how well the Frieza army was animated in the movie compared to how it was in Super. It's a night and day. There's a lot more spectacle in the movie version because of the animation, because of the technical aspects. So what Dragon Ball Super needed to do was not focus on those aspects and focus more on the story. So unfortunately, guys, I have to say that the Resurrection F arc was a waste of time. I'll be honest, guys, this probably was some of the weakest material that Dragon Ball Super had. The Battle of Gods arc did it better because at least they did a lot more changes to the original material, making it a lot more interesting, making the story more of their own. But anyway, guys, at the very least, this is all past us, and we're now on to newer and hopefully greater material. But those are my thoughts on the Resurrection F arc. It kind of was a waste of time. But anyway, guys, who knows, maybe some of you disagree with me, and if you do disagree with me, please tell me in the comments. But until next time, guys, if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, as you will get more videos like this one with my excellent Dragon Ball analysis as soon as it comes out. But anyway, until Dragon Ball calls again, I'm Blackenfist,